This house. Who is in this compound? I've been coming here. I call you. Who is in this house? Who is this house? Who is this house? Okay, don't give me an excuse. Listen to him. You know that you pay your life for how many days now? For 3 months now, my house expired. You don't want to pay me the money. You are telling me excuses. You know that you are sending to town. I'm the one that brought you to this town. Where is my house rent? I'm not a fee. You know that's not what I want to do. Where is the money? Where is the money? I'm not a fee. Where is the money? Okay, don't worry. You will pay. I'll pay. There's no problem now. I'll pay you to feed this house. You know how much the charge now? You know how much the charge now? Am I the one that made the country be like this? I'll pay. You pay me and he. And my father take care of my family. Then I didn't give me excuse in my own house rent. Then give me small time, please. Give me small time. I'll pay. It's not my fault. There's no problem. Please, if you don't that thing, I will arrest you. I will lock you up. What kind of nonsense is this one? No, please, sir. Please, sir. You see the guy outside you. Yeah. Don't admit the lawyer. That's the effect. My guy, don't frustrate. Everything tire me. Everything don't tire me. Life don't tire me. Don't do this country. No. Emeka, just do what I'm telling you now. That's the only solution. Okay? Maybe you should just
say very quickly that one of the major problems that we have in our society is that most citizens do not know their rights, and as such they do not know how to go about getting remedies, when their rights are infringed upon. Now, in tenancy issues, for instance, a tenant has rights, just so a landlord. Now, in a situation whereby a landlord suo motu eject his tenant or lock the tenant from his apartment, then in that circumstance, it is an infringement on the rights of the tenant. And in most circumstances, tenants do not even know that they have rights, and they think the landlord is the overlord. Having a property does not mean that you have the superpower, let me put it that way, to eject the tenant or lock him out, in any given circumstance. Now, even when the tenant is holding up the property, and even when the tenant is in arrears of rent, there are procedures to eject a tenant, and the law has specifically, provided that, in the procedural laws. So before a tenant could be ejected, from his property or his apartment, the statutory notices as laid down in law must be followed strictly, because this is a technical issue in law. And when these notices, the statutory notices, are not followed to the letter, then the court will declare the whole process a nullity. Although the court may not force an unwilling landlord on a tenant and vice versa, but in most circumstances, when the notices as required by law, are not followed, and the procedures are not followed, then the court will declare the whole process, null and void. So, if a landlord wants to eject a tenant from his apartment, the statutory procedures must be followed. First a notice to quit, then second, a notice of intention to go to court and recover possession. If the tenant still holds up the property, then the landlord will now file a plaint or summons, as the case may be, in court, and the court will hear testimonies from both the landlord, who will now be the plaintiff, or the claimant, as the case may be. Then the court will as well hear testimonies from the tenant, who will now become the defendant, in court. So after the evidence or the testimonies of both parties, if the court finds in favor of the landlord, then the tenant than ejected, and it is not the landlord that will sumoto, go and get the properties of the tenant out. It is not his duty to do that. If he does that, it amounts to an infringement, of the law. Then it is the court bailiffs and those who are working in the court that will go, to the property, then get the properties out and take it to court. So it is not the position of the law that a landlord will go to a tenant apartment, lock him out, or sometimes throw his property out. And there are circumstances whereby the landlord will get a carpenter to remove the roof of the tenant's apartment. That is not the position of the law. The law frowns at that. So this is a medium for all of us to know our right, and for all of us to act accordingly in a way laid down in law. And at the same time, let me also say that a tenant also has a remedy. If a landlord locks out the tenant or forcefully or summarily ejects him, then the tenant also has a remedy in law. In that circumstance, the tenant can sue the landlord, and claim damages. So that's